buenas noches, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, muchas gracias to everyone for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, and the love and support you guys share and extend my way. From the Cora, gracias. Also, if my message or the videos come out to somewhat of an understanding or liking, do please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Well, to get into the topic I want to touch on today, right? And as you guys know, as I always do with the personal experience, but more so, I want to answer a couple preguntas, right? Questions. First and foremost, I want to keep my word with a camarada that's been asking me to touch on Lynwood, and this would be one of a couple I won't be touching on camaradas from Lynwood, right? Do forgive that I took long, but anyways, also I got an Instagram from a couple individuals, right? That have nothing to do with Lynwood, but basically they're them level 10s, right? That they been there, done that, and they will never go against their belief, no matter what or who said, right? So anyways, you guys know I don't woof, I don't talk masa, so I wanna basically touch on a personal thing, right, that I went through seeing with my eyes, and to answer that, right. Anyways, I want to take you to the feds, right, and this is when I'm with Sana, and it goes with also what I say, right, that it don't matter how much a Billy different than the next, another day they all have that mentality or they have to blend in, right? Anyways, as you guys know, in that on the yard, Chino from SD was there, Old Man from Gary Lomas, Joe, Big Joe, G.I. Joe. From not, there was a few Billies on that yard, right? Just to leave it like that. But you could say the most influential ones to say it in that sense was definitely Joe and Sana, right? And excuse me, basically when I got there, I met three camaradas, right? All three of them, they were from Lynwood. Smalls from Young Crowd, and Pájaro from Pobre. To be sincere, up until then, I not even know Pobre was out in Lynwood, right? And then there was the homie kid from, man, I'm so sorry on that neighborhood. Is Paragons, something to that effect. I remember he had a big P, right? The back of his head, and for those that might remember, Smalls basically has Southside in his mustache and a YC on his chin, right? Anyways, the one I got close to was Smalls, right? Because the homie, he's been down for a while, so he had that mentality, right? We started sharing our story, typical camaradas, just start basically trying to get to know each other, right? And anyways, the homie told me that he had gotten busted for some gang stuff in Lynwood, right? In 1990, 89, no, it was 90. And he basically did 10 balas, 10 years in state. And staying in the state, I didn't have the pleasure of knowing him or hearing of, right? And he was doing things, right? Holding responsibilities for Billy's. More so, shameful, but to those that would later politic against his own homeboy, right? Nevertheless, when he was about to get out, he got okey doke by the Federicos, right? And they ended up giving him some more time in the feds, and it's how he ended up out there. The other homies, I know one was for a robbery, and another one for shooting, I believe, because of the type of gun or bullet or something to that effect. Anyways, the point is they were all three there, right? They were famous. The homie kid was the one that was mostly distant, right? Well, not distant, but he was real close with G.I. Joe. And as you guys know, G.I. Joe had a chip against camaradas from his area or from the area, right, that we're from. So, we talked, but nothing like with Smalls, right, or even Pájaro. But anyways, basically while we're there was a vato from Barrio Tres that got there, and I'll put his name out on blast, right? Creeper. And that fool, he had a way to making feria. mainly in weight, right? And it wasn't him, it was his familia. So his his crime though was just one of them crimes that it should not even be up for questioning, right? As a campolero, as a man, it should not be up for questioning. I'm not even gonna go into detail, right? Out of respect for everyone. But I read the paperwork. You know, when he first got there, he basically got there with a wheeler from a different Pili, right? Which was from Hazard. I'll just leave it like that. And saying he had a pass. Cause again, he had an S crime on a child. Period. Point blank. But literally a child. You know, I read the paperwork and it was a girl so young that when this fool did whatever he did to her, he literally hurt her to the point that brought things out. You know, and I won't get more graphic than that because, and I just won't, you know. But nevertheless, he was a piece of. There should be no way, no form for this fool's head to be played with as a soccer, right? On the yard. Nevertheless, he had that on appeal where he was being given a pass. And of course, you know, Sana followed through to check on what or why, sir. And with no shame at all, he came and told us that he was allowed to program. That was nothing going to be done to him, period. You know, at first, everyone was hot, right? Including myself. You know, and taking labs with Smalls, we basically went back and forth on, you know, we should, regardless, see how we could blend this in to have this full clip, right? Again, you know, I'll speak of myself. I guess fear was bigger than what I consider my beliefs, right? Cause again, I read the paperwork, but right after Sana, it just came like a little ladder, right? All the Baileys on the yard, they said he was hands off. You know, even Crook from Alley Boys was mad that he always did what Joe decided, right? And nevertheless, we couldn't do nothing. You know, it didn't surprise me from Chino from San Diego, cause that fool's he's trash too, right? But basically after that little trip, you could say, it came into play why he was getting a pass, right? When you start being the middleman to certain things reaching places, feria, stuff, you come to know the real reason what Billies are, what they hold the values on there, right? You see all this, you know, this ain't allowed. This is our program. We don't tolerate this. That's just a mask. That's false. Again, there is no such thing as a program per se, right? As a suit program. At the end of the day, it's MS program. Point blank, whatever it may be, you're gonna follow suit. Or you're gonna go to the side you so much talk against, right? And I mean, not even that, right? But you're gonna buck up and do what you're gonna do, and at the end of the day, you're not gonna win. Cause that included myself at that moment, right? As a campolero, you go against a Billy and we're gonna hoop bang. And no questions asked, right? So the carnalismo goes out the door from that. Cause we don't have a program. We don't have a structure. Our program is what the MS says. But we can't go against what they say, right? Even tell our opinion, right? Cause you see, within time, Smalls had a big problem, as we all did, right? But basically, Smalls felt what a lot of camaradas failed to recognize, including myself, right? At this time, which is the things that we're bringing to the table or we've done that they don't have no value for any Billy. Again, what you do in one place don't mean nothing in a different spot, right? Absolutely nothing. That includes the streets. Nevertheless, he questioned things. He was pressing on it. And I'll just say, this cat from Compton, he was bringing dope money, good. He had a lot of people that, regardless of the trash he was supporting him in getting things done, right? I'm not saying his neighborhood, but I know he had a lot of people, right? Out there in his area or wherever that avenue was coming from, but he had means to make feria. That at the end of the day, that's what they were giving in the past for, right? He was paying. That was for sure money At the end of the day, if he stopped paying, they were gonna clip him, and he knew it. So it was like a little drop coming in into their pocket, right? And that meant more than not putting up with a child's rapist. It's just facts. Again, to all them level 10s, if you'd have read the paperwork, curious to know what you would have done. You see, just by your palabras, and I'm not exposing who you are, but just from your words, I know you haven't done time. You're not speaking to a new booty. Again, I know I sound tonto, so, you know, but in regardless, you wouldn't have done nothing to put up with the orders just like everyone else, or you went on a mission, locked it up, or come out and get whacked. Ain't nobody was gonna back you up on the yard. You see what we see nowadays? Camaradas, families getting stomped on. No other Spili's gonna speak for them. Ain't no other camarada gonna buck up for them. What you see at times is when your celly knows you're in the right, he rides with you. But literally, he rides with you, right? He'll be gone just like you will. Nevertheless, the homies Smalls and Pájaro, they were the main ones pushing it, right? Asking why there was enough camaradas on the yards to cover that, whatever they were receiving from Homeboy, right? But to appeal is a loss. You see, they're already getting what they're getting from you, and they're getting that individual stuff. So why would they have to give something up at the expense of your argument or discomfort? A lot of people speak about pride. When it comes to this individual, there ain't no pride. Believe me, if you're really done time, you know what I'm talking about. See, I met a lot of cats that were truly in the mix, holding jardins down, being responsible, whatever. They did a lot of shady stuff though in between. As myself had to hold down jardines, right? The end of the game, at least with me, was to respect camaradas, to build camaradas. It was not always possible. Sometimes you couldn't avoid stuff. There was individuals that held yards for Pilis, and at the same time, they were fooling Pilis when they were back there. Basically, we're straight meanies. Why I say that? Because, I left May 2015 to the feds. It's when everything started seeming clear that we might be some action to get out the shoe, right? Before then, we were like myself that had life. It was never getting out, period, point blank. When it started becoming real, all them cats were on the yard bullying camaradas, and they were better than camaradas, and just abusing their power on their appealy skirt, right? Would eventually get validated and be back there. And when it started becoming real, being a lifer never mattered to them. But when it started becoming real, when you weren't going to be able to play your games with the bees no more, because they were going to have to buck up and walk with them on the yard, So what did they do? They started worrying about getting out of prison. So what did they do? They dropped that kite to the Judas. And there was a lot of them that locked it up. And you can call it whatever you want to call it. That needs to get out. It was never a factor before then, right? And at least for me, it was never a factor. And I met a lot of cats that they were scandalous, right? On the yards, bullies, whatever. Always wanted to minimize gente, whatever. Because they were secure that the Pilis were going to listen to them, and they were all back there. There ain't too many people that were willing to pick up case to go back there with the Pili, right? And so they knew they could keep him at bay. But when it became real, and they were slammed back there, all of a sudden, I want to go home, And they tell the cops, I don't want to program no more. I'm done with this. To what extent they take it, that's their business, right? But regardless, it's fear. Point blank, right? Anybody could come up and on here and sugarcoat it however you want. But at the end of the day, it's a fear factor. I mean, tell me what neighborhoods do on the streets, right? They're scared of getting green lighted, getting a Pili mad, getting their neighborhood on that lista, getting on that lista, because they would eventually hit prison. But are you really scared of Pilis? Or you're scared of the camaradas that are gonna do the police beatings. See, this is what happened, right? After Sana told him just to be quiet, kept pushing, that it wasn't his decision, right? It was a Billy from Hasser giving that pass, and they had to respect it. They couldn't go against him. You see, when it's things like this, all of a sudden they can't politic against each other, right? But when they're trying to take control from each other, then they can. So you're telling me it holds more weight to protect an ex-crimer, trash, than actually honoring your camarada, or your carnal in this case, and not politic against them? You know, what ended up happening, all three homies, cause kid would end up, supporting his hometowns. Smalls and Pájaro would get punished by Big Joe. He got tired, I guess. Yes, Big Joe. He started working some angles with this cat, right? That had them crimes, and he got pissed off that they were questioning their decisions. Again, we're nobody to question them. We're nobody to even ask a question. Period. I remember when I first started my time, Raul. He told me, as a campolero, you're always able to question everything, and even from a pili, out of respect, you're to get an answer. Man, things surely change, right? All these three homies, we're talking about 2016 and 2017, right? So if we add them up, by this time, the homie Smalls just alone had 17 balas serving the causa to whatever extent he did, right? And it was that quick that Big Joe decided to put steel in them for them to stay quiet and follow program. All three of them got hit. And of course, they got agüites. They got hurt by this. Again, is the agonies I speak of, right? What soldado you're gonna be? You're gonna be a prideful and lock it up? Or you're gonna be really about your stuff, get whacked, and keep pressing that dilemma you're pressing, that problem? No. It's gonna be more important to you to keep programming, right? So you're gonna put up, as myself, put up, shut up, and keep pushing. So you can miss me with this stuff. I mentioned the three camaradas by name and everything. I don't know where they're at now. When I was there with them, for them to be quiet, they got checked. But they got checked, right? They got steel put in them over a rapist that had a lot of money, or his people. So you, as a good soldado, was worth less than that. Even though you were pulling things in too. They're never gonna lose. Remember that. So you could come up here with all this, yo soy el más chingón, que yo subo y bajo. When you come, I went and came back, and you could call me what you want. Yeah, I agree with you. You're better than me. You know more about the program than I do. It's okay. Again, I was never nobody. Never wanted to be nobody, right? I was just one out of thousands of followers. Blind follower. But this was one of many I personally dealt with them crimes that they were untouchable. Ain't nobody could question it. Whoever did, don't go put up with him. Remove him. Believe me, Joe was kind by having them hit 3 times each. Go to your cell, heal up on your own, come out, and forget what you were speaking on. Tell me how would you feel? See, them lights and myth, again, they come from somebody that's just spreading poison. Like those that come on and tell you gotta go in and earn your stripes. They're gonna show you canalismo, they're gonna show you love. What you do, it's gonna always hold value. It's gonna give you stripes. Don't allow yourself to get fooled on that, Be strong for your homies, for those that love you. Most of all, be smart, be strong for yourself. Even if you take a palabra from as much as out there, make a sentence out of it to make yourself stronger. Most of all, stay true to yourself and loyal to loved ones. Against camarada, sorry, on the first topic I touched on Lynwood, it's something of this effect. I just want to touch on now. Don't matter how much time you have, right? Don't matter how much you're holding down the causa, or you're down for the causa. We can't question the EME program. Why? Well, I'll leave this video with that. You guys tell me why. But I want a sincere Answer on the why. Why? What do they give the barrios? Period. What do they give the raza? But there's the key word. What do they do for the raza? Besides threatening them, pump fear in them. Please answer me. If you gotta call me out my name, whatever, do it. I ask with all due respect. With this says, again, stay true to yourself, loyal to your loved ones. Buenas noches.